warns that South Africa could see more provincial coalition governments after the 2029 general election. Speaking at the launch of the Coalition Barometer for 2023 to early 2025 by the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, Booysen highlighted that coalitions have become a permanent feature of South African politics. And for more on this, we are joined on the line by Professor Susan Booysen. Prof, good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, Lulu. Thanks for the invitation.
Now, Prof, what factors are driving the increasing prevalence of coalition governments in South African provinces? And how do you see these dynamics evolving by the year 2029 in terms of general elections?
Yes, indeed, Lulu. In the previous election, we already saw an escalation. There are 3 coalition provinces in South Africa at the moment: Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and Northern Cape. And if we look at election trends, and especially those in the African National Congress, ANC, over the period from about 2004 and a few of the provinces only 5 years later in 2009, there's always been a systematic decline in their support. And in none of the cases has there been any upward blip in the graph. And if one combines that with the fact that we do not see political dynamics on the ground changing, we do not see a new groundswell of support for the ANC in the provinces where it still has the majority, then more coalitions become just more probable. And we can also note specific provinces like Free State and Mpumalanga, for example. After the last year's election, of course, they only came out in early 50s. And by all historical and current trend indications, there won't be an improvement. And these two then also have a good chance to slip into coalition territory. Northwest Province sitting on 58%, which means it could be safe if the ANC does not collapse further, like it did in KwaZulu-Natal, for example. And the only provinces that really seem safe after next year's election, if the current trends and rate of decline continues, will be Eastern Cape and Limpopo. And yes, wherever the ANC slips below 50% of the provincial support, coalition government is indicated. In many countries, of course, the biggest party in any election is allowed to govern. But in South Africa, the party has to have an outright majority or a 50% plus majority. And that means either coalitions in a formal sense of the word, like GNU, which is a coalition formally, will be indicated, or minority government. And one of the lessons that we also learned through this barometer from local governments, where there is one overwhelmingly big party, albeit one without an outright majority. In some cases, several cases, it is the ANC, and the biggest opposition party in those localities then does not have a chance to have a matching majority, to bring in a matching majority or construct a majority coalition. Those ones will then be for coalition or for minority government.
Now, Prof, how effective has the Coalition Barometer been in assessing the stability and performance of coalition governments in South Africa from 2023 to early 2025? And with the showing of a decline in volatility in coalition governed municipalities between these years, that's 2023 and early 2025. Yet there's minimal improvement in financial management and service delivery.
Yes, indeed. Well, in first case, I think the barometer is very accurate, very reliable. Of course, this is the second edition of this barometer. The first one started with the local government elections of 2021, and edition 1 ran from 2021 to 2023, and now barometer 2, the current release one, is 23 to 25. and we developed some very meticulous research instruments, monitoring instruments, that lists all the indicators that we monitor for politics and for governance on the other side. And we around along the 70 case studies, approximately 70, that turned out to be coalition governments locally in the 2021 elections. We've been monitoring those ones systematically, all changes coming in. And now we set the base for provincial and national government, also indicating all the factors that we are monitoring. So we are pretty sure that we say, that when we say this local government, for example, has stabilized, then we have got all the facts. And the barometer is actually a wonderful resource document. It's 500 plus pages, the big document. And so we hope that it will help serve as a recording of this phase in South African history. And yes, the other factor that you mentioned was that even when the cases when we see stabilization, that's in the last 2 years, 23 to 25, we saw fewer coalition turnovers altogether, changes, or just chopping and changes, smaller changes within an existing coalition. We saw less of that than in a period of great fervor just following the 2021 local government elections. And yet, and that is the tragedy and irony, sadness of what this research shows, that even when these coalition governments then became more stable, we did not see necessarily an improvement in governance and in financial management of those municipalities. Of course, there are little exceptions here and there, but the overall trend is not in the direction of improvement. And part of the sadness of this is that this is very much the line that we see in all local government in South Africa, except for a few stars, exceptional good performers. The bulk of them, of the local municipalities, are just not up to the tasks that they have.
Now, how do you assess the long-term sustainability of the GNU, for instance, the Government of National Unity, particularly in light of potential flashpoints like the ANC's National General Council or the DA's Federal Congress, and looking at it from the barometer suggestion that despite tensions within these coalitions, just reading verbatim, over certain policies such as the Bela Act and the economic redress policies, the GNU remains a logical arrangement. Touch on that for us.
Yes, there is something that I really pointed out strongly, and that emerges from this research, is that South Africa's coalitions are pretty unique. Coalitions are inherently unstable and tumultuous. But in South Africa, I think we're taking it to new heights. And the rules of engagement of South Africa's national level coalition, by all indications, as you also alluded to in your question, is one of rough and tumble. There's contestation, there's acrimony, there's toxic narratives in between. And we see crises proclaimed regularly, almost boringly regularly. And then it subsides again, and the main parties in the coalition, ANC and DA, again cooperate nicely for a few weeks, and the smaller parties are not mobilized to try to bring the ANC an alternative majority. This seems to be the way that coalition government is running in South Africa. We have seen so many cases now, a good 7 or 8 crises, where things were supposed to break apart, but they do not, and they emerge from that. And I think there is a sense of necessity of cooperation, despite so many ideological differences, despite a few policy differences, especially when it comes to race and redistribution. Then those coalitions, the big GNU coalition, really gets stuck. But beyond that, there is a great sense, apparent on the surface of it, that there is a need for cooperation and do things in a national interest or for the country, etc. And if we accept that is and that has been working in the first year, this is the rules of engagement between the parties, then it could indeed persist for a while.
Now, Prof, just the barometer references challenges with the mixed member proportional system and its impact on coalition stability. Now, are you able to elaborate on how specific aspects of South Africa's electoral system influence coalition governance and what reforms may enhance stability without compromising democratic representation?
Yes, what we know from the electoral system, of course, is that national and provincial is a pure proportional representation system, whereas locally we're seeing so much instability, the great site of instability. There is this mixed electoral system where 50% of the wards locally, of course, are elected in terms of wards and councillors, and the other half proportional representation. And it is in that component of ward-based, constituency-based elections that we really have so much scope for instability, that councillors have found new political allegiances, then they resign, and there are by-elections. That's why we have by-elections at local government level and not provincially and nationally. And it's those ward-based systems that are a big source of instability because things can change. If it's a pure proportional representation system, the representatives are elected, and the party is elected for 5 years, and the party replaces, and the voters' choice at the time of the election, and they all know they vote for a 5-year term.
Your call has been placed on hold.
The choice is then there and stability persists.
Well, Prof, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. We have run out of time and are going to have to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you, Lulu.
That is South African political analyst, Professor Susan Booysen, joining us on the line. It is 22 after 12 Central African time.
Get Channel Africa on